Good day and welcome to the program Changing the World with me, Lorette Dye. It is, as always, a privilege to share this time with you. Today we are going to talk about faith. I know that there are many people that say, but I have faith. I know what it is. But I do believe that there are a deeper level of faith that we can enter, and therefore we're going to talk about faith over 2 programs. I am seeing forward to explore this concept of faith with you. I believe that it is impossible to live our lives without God and understanding that everything is about Him. We are talking about faith today. I want to read to you Hebrews 11, verse 1-3. I'm reading from the Easy Read version. Faith is what makes real the things we hope for. It is proof of what we cannot see. God was pleased with the people who lived a long time ago because they had faith like this. Faith helps us understand that God created the whole world by His command. This means that the things we see were made by something that cannot be seen. Hebrews here talks about faith in terms of believing in what we cannot see. And for many people, they look at Christianity and they look at the notion of God as just that, a notion. Because to them, the idea of believing in something that you cannot see seems wrong and impossible. And normally when people choose not to follow God or believe in God, they will go back to, but you are believing in something that is not visible. And that is true. We believe in God although we cannot see Him. The problem is not that God doesn't reveal Himself. The problem is that people don't know how to see God, how to see the signs of God. In Exodus, when Moses went up to the mountain and the Israelites stay at the bottom, God revealed Himself to the Israelites through thunder and lightning, and they became very afraid. They said, "That is God, surely it is Him." They've seen Him, they heard Him, but they were afraid. And as the days went by and Moses was still up on the mountain and God was still working with him, they turned away from God. Therefore, I want to tell you, it is not about seeing God. That is not what will determine if people will serve God or not. It will always be through faith. And God is expecting that kind of faith from us. The wonderful thing is, once you meet Christ and you experience His presence and His Spirit in you, and that He talks to you, it actually changes, because you don't need faith anymore. You have a real experience, and you know, as you know, that God is real. Faith is necessary to have, but the better we get to know God, the easier it is, because He does reveal Himself to us. The only problem is that scares some people, and then they still turn away from God. I want to invite you and encourage you to hold on to your faith and not let it go. I talked about that God did reveal himself to people and they became scared and still turned away from him. I just want to read you those verses. Exodus 19 verse 3. Then Moses climbed up the mountain to meet with God. The Lord spoke to him on the mountain and said, "Tell this to the Israelites, the great family of Jacob." And in verse 16, on the morning of the third day, a thick cloud came down onto the mountain. There was thunder and lightning and a very loud sound from a trumpet. All the people in the camp were frightened. And we continue with Exodus 20 verse 18. During all this time, the people in the valley heard the thundering and saw the lightning on the mountain. They saw smoke rising from the mountain and heard the sound of the trumpet. They were afraid and shook with fear. They stood away from the mountain and watched. Exodus 24 verse 10. On the mountain these men saw the God of Israel. He was standing on something that looked like blue sapphires, as clear as the sky. God revealed himself to Moses and to the Israelites. But this is also the time in their history when they waited for Moses that were on the mountain for 40 days, that turned around and made a golden calf as a deity. And how incredibly sad is it if you've seen God and if you've become aware of his presence and of who he is, and you still turn away from him. I've seen with many people what happened. They will hear from God, but they will think and look with human eyes and question what they've seen and what they heard and what they experienced. And they will convince themselves that what they've seen and heard and experienced was just out of themselves. And instead of following God and being more committed and having faith that cannot be shaken, people often turn away from God after they became aware of him and who he is, and that he is true and real. We should continue to live in faith and look at God and never ever look away. We are talking about faith today and literally about the basics of having faith. Being able to believe in God even although you can't see him. But we also said that once you have a relationship with God and you've experienced him and his presence, faith is not really needed anymore because you know God is real. Unless, like many people do, you convince yourself that what you've experienced is out of yourself. People forget that they should look at the spiritual world through spiritual eyes, and they try to explain it in human terms. I always say, I don't want to serve a Mickey Mouse God. If God weren't able of so much more than we as humans are capable, and even of understanding, then God can't be God. Then he is a human being. Then he is on the same level of us. And he knows that his greatness is too much for us. The Bible teaches us that no man will look at God and live. I want to read for you from John 14 verse 26. But the Helper will teach you everything and cause you to remember all that I told you. This Helper is the Holy Spirit that the Father will send in my name. Acts 1 verse 8. But the Holy Spirit will come on you and give you power. You will be my witnesses. You will tell people everywhere about me, in Jerusalem, in the rest of Judea, in Samaria, and in every part of the world. And lastly, Acts 11 verse 23. Barnabas was a good man, full of the Holy Spirit and faith. When he went to Antioch and saw how God had blessed the believers there, he was very happy. He encouraged them all, saying, Always be faithful to the Lord. Serve him with all your heart. Many more people became followers of the Lord. You see, the Spirit of God is a real presence, and he was given to us as a helper and to guide us and to be with us and to encourage our faith. And once you have a relationship with God, once you've given your life to God, you receive the Spirit of God. And if you look with spiritual eyes, you will be aware of how the Spirit is working in your life and how the Spirit of God is testifying with you and in your heart about God and about God's realness. We have many stories of people from many countries that has experienced this presence of God, that has experienced God, and that God is talking to them. There are stories of Muslims in countries where they've never heard about Jesus and about God, and they hear his voice and turn to him. How much more is the Spirit of God available to you, where you have the knowledge, you know about God, you know Christ has died on the cross for you, and you accepted it in faith. Now that faith can help you to look with spiritual eyes and see how God is working in your life and in this world. We are talking about faith, and I want to focus on another aspect of faith, and that is that we must have faith in the storm. It is when things seem impossible, when things seem overwhelming, and it seems too difficult, and as if we are going to drown, that we need to keep our eyes on God and keep the faith in him. Just remember, it doesn't mean that storms won't happen, that difficulties won't happen, but God will never leave us or forsake us. In one example, in Matthew 8, from verse 23 to 26, we read about his disciples being caught in the storm and forgetting that God is in control. I'm going to read for you. Jesus got into a boat, and his followers went with him. After the boat left the shore, a very bad storm began on the lake. The waves covered the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. The followers went to him and woke him. They said, "Lord, save us, we will drown." Jesus answered, "Why are you afraid? You don't have enough faith." Then he stood up and gave a command to the wind and the water. The wind stopped, and the lake became very calm. If God is with you, even if it feels to you as if he is sleeping, as if he is not there or not giving attention. You can trust him. You can have the faith that no matter how bad the storm, Jesus will never leave you and he will never allow you to drown. I want to give you another example. In Matthew 14, this is the story where Jesus came to his disciples that were in the boat, and they saw him walking on the water. And first of all, when they saw him, they became very fearful. You see, when we see God, when we see his miracles, like we said before, instead of growing our faith, we often became scared, because for our human minds, that just is too much. Then Jesus quickly spoke to them and he said, "Don't worry, it is me. Don't be afraid." In Matthew 14 verse 27 and in 28, Peter said, "Lord, if that is really you, tell me to come to you on the water." So see, Peter's faith here. He believes that he can also walk on the water if God will be there for him. And in verse 29, Jesus said, "Come, Peter." Then Peter left the boat and walked on the water to Jesus. So here he is actually doing it. He sees that it is happening, that it is possible. But in verse 30, "But while Peter was walking on the water, he saw the wind and the waves. He was afraid and began sinking into the water. He shouted, 'Lord, save me.'" And in 31, "Then Jesus caught Peter with his hand. He said, 'Your faith is small. Why did you doubt?'" Often we turn to God, we have faith, we trust him, we step out, we take on big things that we never thought we could. But then the storm comes, the wave comes, and we start looking with human eyes. We forget to keep our eyes on God, and we look at the storm, we look at the circumstances, and we lose our faith. I want to encourage you with these words. Keep your eyes on God, no matter what. As we get to the end of our time together, I want to leave you with the following verse. Matthew 8 verse 10. When Jesus heard this, he was amazed. He said to those who were with him, "The truth is, this man has more faith than anyone I have found, even in Israel." And my prayer for you today is that you will be that person. You listen to Changing the World with me, Lorette Dye. And remember, changing the world starts with you. Also, don't let the day go by without laughing, dancing, singing, and especially sitting at God's feet. I am, as always, grateful for this time that you spent with me. Be safe and be blessed.